Yeah, yeah. So, Sheikh Navaid, mashallah, we can actually, I think this mic is probably better for you. Is it on?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So he's in town for a few different things, and he was here this morning for the seminary. He was working with some of the students. For those of you who don't know, of course, Qadam also has, mashallah, like basically an Islamic college, right? Preparing young scholars to come and develop their own community programs and to serve the community. So he spent some time talking about prophetic leadership, which is one of his areas of study and expertise, mashallah. Sheikh Navaid actually did his own Islamic studies in the city of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina. He graduated from the Islamic University of Medina, and then came back to Canada, mashallah, to practice and to build community there. So we're happy to have you. Shukran jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
How's everything?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
I'm so happy to be here, bro.
It's an honor, man.
Like I feel like I've seen this so many times on in the internet. To be here is like surreal.
Well, the funny thing is, okay, you have been here before because we've had food over there together.
Exactly, but that was different.
When it was closed.
I mean, we just spoke about brothers eating chocolate and pizza together.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, what type of bid'ah did I walk into?
There was a guy that was with us. I can't name him because I don't want his daughter to lose respect for him. But we had pizza, and then we were eating pizza, and he would take a bite, and then we would notice he would reach under the table
to grab a piece of chocolate.
And then he would eat a piece of chocolate in between bites, taking the whole sweet, salty thing to a new level.
Oh, man.
So, Sheikh Navaid, I'm happy that didn't scare you away from coming back.
Never.
To see us,
I love you guys too much, man.
Alhamdulillah.
I love you guys too much, mashallah.
It's good to have you, alhamdulillah. We're happy that you hit us during a relatively good weather season. It was really hot here a couple weeks ago.
I don't even know what that means because I was sweating so much today. I'm like, how do people survive there?
I think in Canada it was like 40 last week or 2 weeks ago.
And people are like melting.
Yeah. So for us, when it gets there, it's pretty hot.
Yeah.
But now this is like beautiful. Like this weather for us is like, alhamdulillah, we'll take this all day. Yesterday was great. Today was a little, it's good, but it got a little warm. But beggars can't be choosers. And we are all fuqara when it comes to a lot of things, including weather. So, but alhamdulillah, it's a blessing to have you here. This is our Tuesday night class. So we have Monday night, which is heart work. Monday night is the more large community class. We're going through different topics there. Tuesday night was sort of a matriculation of Monday night, where there was a group of people who are a little bit maybe older, a little bit more advanced in their life. They hit a few more milestones. And they wanted to have, I would say, more conversations that were more substantive and more in-depth. Not to say that heart work is not, but sometimes I feel like in the conversation piece, maybe the end result of the conversation is more inspirational on Mondays, whereas here, we talk a lot about, quite frankly, we talk a lot about what happens with your legacy after you pass away. We talk about crafting your identity in a way that's meaningful. We talk about thinking a lot about, your death, the afterlife. I mean, everything that we talk about really is framed in the language of, the long term, right? Beyond the aspirations of a 20-year-old who's starting in the workforce. Now you're 30 and older, and you start to realize that you're coming close to, Allah knows best, and cresting through perhaps the halfway point of your life. And that realization is very sobering. And so the conversations that we have here, they're lighthearted, they're funny as well, but we try to really anchor them with a lot more meaning and substance, in a serious way. And I think everyone's prepared for that type of depth as well, inshallah. So I thought this would be perfect for someone like yourself, mashallah, who you have a lot of depth and substance as a person, mashallah.
Barakallahu feek.
So jazakallah khairan. Sheikh, we should get started. We've been reading from, in this class, this is our 10th week, a book called Kunuz min Al-Ghazāli, which translates to a treasury of Ghazali. And it's an author, contemporary author, Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway, who did a compilation of some of the best passages that he thought were passages of relevance to the Muslim spiritual development, from Al-Ghazali's works. And so we talked about a lot of different topics so far. Intention, we talked about sincerity, we talked about materialism versus spirituality, talked about philosophy. Imam Ghazali, some of his more famous challenges that he dealt with in his life. Tonight, the topic that Dr. Mustafa chose, he summarized it with the phrase, striving beyond justice. And I think that, we live in a time, primarily in our social era, where we see a lot of relationships as transactional. You know, relationships, we try to measure them out very evenly. Almost like when you're baking something, you try to measure it out evenly. You flatten out the scoop or the cup of flour. And a lot of us, we view relationships in that way. There's a lot of inherent like scorekeeping, right? I think you deal a lot with marriages and with family dynamics as a scholar and an imam in Canada. Do you see a lot of that kind of culture between, you know, parents and kids, spouses, et cetera, people keeping score and kind of that being a challenge?
I think in relationships in general, just the way society molds us is that we become very transactional. But I think there's two components to this as well. Like as human beings, we are created reciprocal. If someone's nice to us, we want to be nice to them. But if someone harms us, we have anger and rage as well that we want to reciprocate as well. And that is the part that should be controlled. So with that being said, there are certain moments where being transactional is good, but for the vast majority of times, you should always be more generous than, you know, transactional.
SubhanAllah. And that's exactly what Imam Ghazāli talks about here. He defines later in the passage, we'll read it inshallah, but he defines this concept, this Islamic concept of ihsan, which scholars really do their best to try to define in a concise way. I mean, really, there's probably books that are written on this topic. Ihsan, it shares the same root as the Arabic word that indicates beauty or something that's ornamented. And it comes from the idea of a person's character being beautiful and them engaging with other people at a level that's beyond transactionality, right? So for example, you know, the statement that we have in English, right? Do unto others as you would like to be done to yourself. And this is seen as the golden rule. But in Islam, we actually don't consider that to be the golden rule. That's like I don't know, the very, very basic level of Islamic conduct. To do unto others as you would want to be done to yourself is considered like basic. That's basic human relationship or character. What we consider to be prophetic is that the Prophet ﷺ would do unto others much more and better than he would expect to be done to himself. And so scholars would define ihsan by saying that ihsan, he says it here, which is really beautiful. He says, نعني بالإحسان. He says, فعل ما ينتفع به المعامل وهو غير واجب عليه. He says that ihsan is when a person does something, a behavior, an action that is beneficial to the one that they are interacting with or engaging with, and it is not an obligation upon them to do this, meaning that they're not beholden to this. He says, وَلَكِنَّهُ rather تَفَضَّلٌ مِنْهُ. It is actually just simply a favor or a better action to be done. It's an elevation of that person's interaction with this person. So ihsan, he's saying here in the relationship department, is when a person doesn't look at what was done to them and what is asked of them, but they look at what is beyond what is being asked of them. So I want to read, inshallah, the translation of what Al-Ghazāli says here. And I want to have Sheikh Navaid, you know, while he's here with us, share some wisdom. If you guys have any questions, of course, the Slido is open. So you can go to slido.com. That's slido.com. And you can type in the words 30 and up. All of them are the words. And then you can start sending questions there. I can't wait to see your marriage questions. Okay.
Allahu Akbar.
So it's an inside joke. It's not really a joke. It's just inside. It's just an inside thing that I'm dealing with. But inshallah, let's go ahead and get started, Sheikh. So he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's pretty long, so I'm not going to do the Arabic tonight as well because it can get pretty lengthy. He says, Allah ta'ala the Most High has commanded both justice and excellence. Allah has commanded both. Okay, Sheikh, what do you think he means by this? What can we take from that?
So I think stepping back, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated laws and legislations, not for the sake of them being the norm of practice, but they're there to protect the weak and those that can't stand up for themselves, to make sure that they are protected. But in terms of our interaction with one another, we should always be striving for higher than that. So don't just look at the baseline and say, this is what I'm meant to do, but this is the baseline so that no one is harmed, but you always strive for better. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded justice and excellence together, the justice is what the baseline is, and excellence is what you should be striving for.
And this is actually a concept that we hear every Friday in the Jumu'ah khutbah.
Yeah,
right? We hear this phrase, literally, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ.
Yeah.
That Allah has commanded you with the responsibility of justice and also with good character, with ihsan. So it's interesting that the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was that every Friday, he would take a moment in the sermon where everybody was gathered, the only opportunity to speak to everybody, and he would remind them of these two requirements, community requirements. It's almost like he was saying to them, you can't really fit in here if you don't get along with this. There are some people in life like that you're not going to get along with. There are some Muslims in life that you're not necessarily going to be the best of friends with. Correct, Sheikh, or no?
Correct, 100%. Yeah.
And in those relationships, I just saw some people look at each other. Do you not get along with the person that you look at? Usually people look at each other but there are some people in life. You know, I one time heard one of my teachers, Sheikh Hassan, he said something really, really, like, it was very relieving. He said, you don't have to be best friends with everybody. And I think that is like an empowering realization. Really, subhanAllah, the community is so big. What Allah has commanded for us is that we treat each other with courtesy, with love, with communal common love. But at the same time, there might be some differences in personality and differences in persuasion and preference that mean that you might not get along with somebody. I mean, have you ever traveled with a friend that after you were done traveling with, you're like, we're no longer friends?
Never again.
Yeah, because your style was so different. Have you ever shared pizza and then found out that the guy's eating chocolate in between?
Yeah, I've seen that.
And those things end up being sometimes a realization that, you know what, maybe we're not as close in these faculties or departments as we thought we were. So, but in those cases, you cannot be unjust. You can't say that, well, I don't really like this person, so I'm not going to be fair to them. Islam has the base requirement, like Sheikh Naveed just said, justice. Everybody deserves justice, Muslim or non. Doesn't matter what faith tradition, doesn't matter whether or not you get along with them, doesn't matter whether or not their life is diametrically opposed to your moral value. They deserve justice, right? But then there's also the second level, which is ihsan. And that is what we're going to be talking about a little bit more. So he says that Allah Ta'ala commands to this. And then he says, justice is the cause of salvation. And he says the example of that is like capital in trade. On the other side, he says, excellence is the cause of all success and felicity. And it is likened to profit. So when someone's in business, when you sell something, you have your capital, right? You have your investment, you have the revenue, you have that. But then you also, in order to be a successful business, you also need to make profit. If a person is basically just breaking even, then technically they are buying and they are selling. But are they really growing? Are they really increasing? They're not. The only time a person increases, as it comes to the business example, is when they make profit. And so he says here, operating at the level of justice is not going to grow you. It's not going to grow you. You only grow when you operate with the level of ihsan, excellence and beauty. He says anyone who is satisfied with only capital when trading cannot be considered a sane person. Anyone who is only satisfied just by breaking even, if you're a business person, you're not a very good business person. This person's not sane. He says the same then would apply to all of a person's dealings with regards to the hereafter. The religious person, the person who's practicing their faith, should never confine themselves to justice and avoiding injustice. Rather, they should, and he says, while shutting the doors of excellence, rather, they should reflect on the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which says, and do good to others as Allah has done good to you. Sheikh, when you hear that verse, do good in general, open-ended, as Allah has done good to you, what reflections come to mind? I know that there's probably many.
How far can I go back in terms of this?
Please, Sheikh, I talk too much, so cut me off whenever.
No, I don't want to cut you off. I love what you're sharing. So I think let's start off with, why do some people get along and some people not get along? So I think understanding that is very, very important. So we have a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari where the Prophet ﷺ says, Al-arwahu junudun mujannada, فَمَا تَعَرَفَ مِنْهَا اِعْتَلَفَ وَمَا تَنَاكَرَ مِنْهَا اِخْتَلَفَ. That souls are like conscripted soldiers. Those that got along in the realm of the souls will get along in this world, and those that didn't get along in the realm of the souls aren't going to get along here. So before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the physical bodies, He had created the souls and He made them testify to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's interesting because when you look at it, it's as if they had an opportunity to hang out and chill while things were being set up for their testimony, I guess you could call it that. And at that time, certain souls got along. And if those souls got along, naturally, when you meet someone that got along over there, you'll click right away. And this explains so much, because other times you'll meet someone for the first time and you're like, dude, why are we not getting along? Like nothing's even happened. But for some reason, there's this aversion that we have. And this is a spiritual aversion from the realm of the souls. Not to say that they're good or bad, but that's just the way it plays out. And then Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she sort of explains this on how, two women that had met one another from Mecca and Medina, they got along so easily because their souls had met in the previous life. Number two, with regards to business transactions, I think what we're looking at over here is how many people start a business for the sake of breaking even. Like no one does that. So if you're striving just to be just, what Imam Al-Ghazāli rahimahullah is saying, you're striving just to save yourself from the hellfire, but not necessarily go anywhere higher in Jannah. And what you have to be striving for is to go to those higher places in Jannah, and that will only be through the ihsan that you show. So if you strive for ihsan, you're striving for higher levels of Jannah. If you're striving for adal, you're just striving to be saved from the hellfire. So, right? So what do you want to strive for? You always want to strive for more. Number three, I was talking about this transactional relationship that we have. You'll see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He uses transactions as an example because that's what people can relate to. Like everyone has to transact on a daily basis. You buy bread, you buy milk, you do all sorts of things. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَمْوَالَهُمْ بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةِ, it seems very transactional that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has purchased from the believers themselves and their wealth in exchange for them having Jannah. So this means that if you sacrifice your life and your wealth for Jannah, you sacrifice your life and your wealth for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you'll get Jannah. That's not a good understanding, because the Prophet ﷺ tells us that we only enter Jannah based on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, when you put both of these evidences together, that when you sacrifice yourself and your wealth, you're eligible for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the deeds that you do are what will dictate how high you actually go. So now when we get to this verse, وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ, it shows us a very important rule of engagement. There's one element, treat others like you want yourself to be treated. But there's a greater element of treat others the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala treats you. How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala treat you? He gives you even before you ask. When you do ask, He gives you more. When you do ask, He gives you better. He's always looking out for you. You may be asking for something, but it's not good for you. So He gives you something better instead. That is the way we're meant to be looking out for one another, right? That's how you create bonds of relationship. That's how you create family. That's how you create community. That's how you create society. It is dictated upon this concept of irhamu man fid dunya yarhamukum man fis sama. That have mercy and compassion on the inhabitants of the earth, and the one who is above the heavens will have mercy and compassion upon you.
And we learn this, there's so many narrations where the Prophet ﷺ tells us, and this is why I like Tuesday night, because we can say things like very, very directly. I think a lot of times people, they want good friends. Everybody wants good friends. We all want to be good friends and have good friends. And sometimes we wonder in a situation why we don't have the friendships that we yearn for. We wonder why the quality of those relationships may be inconsistent. And the Prophet ﷺ, he teaches us why this is. He tells us why. He says that whoever, for example, is not grateful to Allah, is not grateful to people, they will not be grateful to Allah. So there's like a reciprocal spiritual relationship. A person cannot frame themselves as being like a dichotomous individual. I'm one way with Allah and I'm different with people. Generally speaking, you are who you are. If you're grateful to people, you'll find yourself being grateful to Allah. If you're grateful to Allah, you'll find yourself being grateful to people. So when we find ourselves struggling in relationships, the real question is, how's my relationship with Allah? If that relationship is good, those traits that are good in my relationship with Allah should be cascading down into my worldly relationships as well. If you, for example, are stingy with your time with Allah, you're probably going to be stingy with your time with people.
Allahu Akbar.
Right? The people that are the most generous and charitable in situations, for example, like fundraisers or whatnot, they also tend to be the most generous and charitable with their time and with their ear and with their shoulder and everything. So a lot of times, subhanAllah, we think of our relationship with Allah as being like on a different sphere or realm. It's true. you don't treat the creation like you treat the creator. Of course, you always prioritize Allah, but realize that the traits that we have are the traits that we have. And we can't really decide or dictate when we turn them on or off. They are what they are. So there's that hadith, that narration. There's also the Prophet ﷺ, he taught us, generally speaking, or actually this is a statement of Umar. You know, Umar, he said that the prayer is the most important thing. And he said that, فَمَنْ كَانَ لِصَلَاتِهِ مُضِيعًا فَلِغَيْرِهَا أَضِيعًا. He said that for the person whose prayer is deficient or is weak or is not there, everything else is going to be weak too. Right? Everything else is going to be weak too. You know, a lot of times people talk about the purpose of religion. Like, why do we need religion? This is the big question these days. Like, why do human beings need religion? And it's, you know, Imam Ghazāli is really funny. He's very sarcastic. When you read his books, he's basically he has a lot of trolling, right? I was going to call him a troll, but that would be disrespectful. He trolls people. So he trolled a lot of the religious critics, the critics of religion. And he said that, you know, for these people that say that religion is, what's the word? Outdated, right? It's abrogated. He said, you're abrogated. That's like a person saying religion is dumb and you're like, you're dumb. He basically said the same thing. So what we learn, subhanAllah, is that Umar radiallahu anh is saying one of the reasons why religion is necessary, beyond, of course, just the pure command of Allah, but one of the wisdoms that we find that religious presence is necessary is because it helps guide relationships. You know, one thing I like to tell married couples, especially like these like newlyweds, and I by the way, I don't like making fun of newlyweds. I find that a lot of people who are like married for a while. How long you been married for, Sheikh?
18 years.
Yeah, wow, mashallah. I got 16.
Allahu Akbar.
Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, mashallah. Well, how old were you when you got married?
25.
Oh, okay, mashallah. So, don't do the math. That's impolite. Everyone stop right now.
Actually, the math.
It's like looking up someone's house on Zillow when you get their address. Don't do it.
I think there's like a technicality. There's a difference between when I got my nikah then and when I got my civil registration.
Yeah.
So I think let's go with 17 years.
17 years? Okay. Yeah, Sheikh, you look 30. You're great, mashallah.
Allahu Akbar.
So I've been married 16 years, alhamdulillah. I got married in college. So I got married when I was 20 and now I'm 36, alhamdulillah. And I don't like, when I meet newlyweds, there's like the uncles, you know, they're like, oh, enjoy it, because it's only going downhill from here, you know? And you're like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, friggin' jerk, you know? I remember like when we got married, the uncles are like, it won't last, beta. I'm like, what is wrong with you? And a lot of that, subhanAllah, is just projection, right? It's just projection. But there is one thing that I do tell newlyweds, which I think is important. And Sheikh, you do a lot of, I know, marriage counseling work, and so you can tell me how accurate this is in Canada, right? Here in America, no, but you can tell me, I'm pretty sure it's universal, which is that marriage is the comprehensive coming together of so many different personality and skills, personality traits and skills.
100%.
And of course, you know, whenever anything is novel and new, we actually talked about this earlier today, the difference between nuance and novelty, right?
Yeah.
Whenever anything is novel or new, you need very little motivation to keep it going because the novelty of it is exciting. So this isn't, I'm not taking a shot at newlyweds. I'm just saying it's the nature of everything. In fact, you can share what we spoke about earlier. When you get a new job, right, there's novelty. When you get a new car, there's novelty. When you get new clothes, there's novelty. And then after who knows how much time, for each one it's probably different, the novelty wears off and you notice other things. So if you are working at your job, after a few weeks, they're like, hey, remember that whole remote thing? We need you to come back into work. And you're like, but my friend doesn't have to come back into work. Or you get this new outfit, you like it, and then all of a sudden you just start, Instagram knows you, and Instagram puts the Vela hijab sponsored ads, and all of a sudden now the new stuff you got is no longer good. It's the same thing in relationships. It's the same thing with marriage, with friendships. And Sheikh said something beautiful earlier today. Can you share the difference between novelty and then what actually people should be looking for?
I will briefly. I just want to share something that's on the top of my
mind
right
please.
now. There is a novelty when you first get married, and it's inevitable that you will go through a discovery phase in terms of who you are and who your spouse is, And that may actually be turbulent because you're still trying to figure a lot of stuff out after that novelty phase is over. But if you can ride that out and if you can be patient, there's a new phase that comes about, and that is a layer of depth. Like, you know, they say onions have layers, but I think that's a terrible example. The example I want to share with you, I didn't mean that to be funny, I was real. But
no, you're right. Because every time someone says that, but they're trying to frame it positively, I'm like, I'm not trying to eat an onion raw.
Like, this is, if marriage is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's multiple wrapping papers that are on it. And every once in a while,
you got that remove,
after you know, decades of marriage, inshallah, hoping you're removing one layer of wrapping paper at a time.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
And it's
beautiful.
like a new gift that is presenting itself. And this could be those beautiful characteristics. This could be those beautiful insights. This could be the generosity that they show you beyond just the physical generosity that we see.
And just to add to this, because I know not everybody here is married, but this is every relationship.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, the more, for example, you speak to your parents, right? I mean, even with me, like, I'll take my kids out, and I think I know my kids.
Yeah.
And then my kids, like, ask questions, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And we have
Allah
a conversation, and I'm like, it's like they opened up a new realm for me. Allah. Or you spend, we framed the whole friends trip as a bad thing, but you travel with a friend, and you get closer as a result of that. And you're like, wow, and you come back now more bonded, right, than you were before. Why? Because, like you said, the depth is there.
Yeah.
So
I would say, look, relationships require patience, and you just have to put in the work. You have to put in the time, and whatever seems difficult will become easy once again. So for those of you that are struggling, understand that there's a lot of gifts awaiting for you if you can just, you know, wait it out and work together on that. Now, with regards to this concept of novelty and nuance, you start a new job, you start a new relationship, things are new and exciting. But if you don't know the why and you don't know the what, that novelty clearly wears out very, very quickly. And then you're jumping from one thing to the next. And I think that is like one of the crises of our times when we're constantly having instantaneous gratification. This means novelty runs out even quicker than it used to. So you have to focus on controlling the instantaneous gratification, especially in those things that have very high consequences, right? So like, okay, you're watching a reel, you're not liking it, you can jump onto the next reel. There's a very little consequence that's there. But now when you're in a relationship, whether it's a friend, whether it's a parent, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a child, there are severe consequences to neglecting that relationship, right? And you have to take it a lot more seriously. So what is the nuance that you can develop in the relationship that replaces the novelty so you still have enjoyment and fulfillment that you would get in something that is new? So what you end up looking at, what are parts of the relationship that you enjoy that you can build on, right? So for example, you and your spouse love reading the same genre of books or watching the same genre of movies, right? So doing something like that you can deepen the relationship with, that you reward yourself with at the end of the week, right? So you like reading, actually I don't even know, what are people reading these days?
Imam
Al-Ghazāli.
Yeah, we're today. It's a really philosophically romantic couple.
Man,
have you ever thought about the philosophers? Sorry, yes.
Allahu Akbar. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking of the book Divine Love, right?
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, right? So like that was like the most recent book that I felt became like viral and amongst Muslim couples and stuff like that. So that being said, so at the end of the week, you're done your work week, you want to spend time chilling together. Don't do something mindless where you're not interacting with one another, but do something mindful that you're both enjoying. And the key thing is you're both enjoying and finding fulfillment in it, right? And that is how the relationship grows, where you prefer the other over yourself, right? And you want to do things that will be pleasing to the other. And I think we completely forget about the spiritual dimension of relationships. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates this worldly paradise for you, right? Because there's an ukhrawi paradise that is waiting for you for all the good that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to reward you with. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates a dunyawi paradise for you for the goodness that you show to other people. And this is why someone smiling at you makes you feel good. This is why when you hold the door open for someone and they say thank you, it makes you feel good. These are these smaller paradises that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in this life as a result of the good that you do towards others that is selfless. You take that into a relationship at a much deeper level, pleasing your spouse, spending time with your spouse, preferring your spouse, being generous with your words, being generous with your time, being generous with your thoughts. Like, it's so easy to say when your wife asks you or a friend asks you what's on your mind, and you're like, nothing. I feel like that's the worst cop-out ever. Because sometimes that may be true, there's nothing on your mind, you're just like lost in thought or whatever. But I would say a lot of times we are thinking about things, we just don't want to share it. And then we cop out by, oh, nothing's on our mind. If you can force yourself to speak about what's on your mind, be vulnerable, and trust in Allah that inshallah you're in a safe space with whoever you're with, allow them to share their reflections on your thoughts, and you'll see that's how you deepen the relationship. At one point or another, someone needs to take the first step of being vulnerable. At one point in the relationship, someone needs to take the step of being more grateful. At one point in the relationship, someone needs to take the first step in being more selfless. That's how relationships are going to grow.
And this is why the Prophet ﷺ says, when he talks about the status of relationships in two people, he would say, وَخَيْرُهُمَا مَنْ يَبْدَأُ بِالسَّلَامِ. Right? The one who is better amongst the two people is the one who begins with the salam. Because that person had to be vulnerable. You know, we've all been in a gathering where we've seen someone that we recognized, and in our mind, it's like, who's going to start? You know, do I go to them or do they come to me? And the Prophet ﷺ here, he said the reward, the better amongst the two, is the one who gets up and goes and initiates. Because that initiation is that opening of the door of vulnerability, right? Because the ego is on the other side of that. The ego is the one that says, no, they'll come to me. No, they should come to me. My wife was telling me something that I thought was really, amazing with regards to this deepening the connection with friends. And I think, one of the things that we're dealing with now, Sheikh, primarily, is the crisis of loneliness. And I think that there's a lot of people, some of the questions we get, people feel like I'm surrounded by people, but I'm so alone. And I think that's exactly what you're mentioning, which is, it's not that you're lonely, you just don't have the depth of connection in those relationships. So you have a lot of surface connections. You have a lot of things, but you have a lot of people who like your statuses, right? You have a lot of people who text you every day, but the depth of the relationship is not there. And one of the gatekeepers to depth can be, honestly, finances. Because a lot of times when people make plans, those plans, the barrier to those plans is like, let's go get something to eat.
Right.
And realistically, if you want to create and cultivate a relationship, it can be expensive. And so somebody has to create the counterculture now, which is, in order for us to have depth, we don't have to spend money. We can sit together and we can enjoy each other's company. We don't have to spend money on a $9 latte. Because not everybody can afford $45 a week for bad coffee, right? Really, wallahi, and so my wife was saying that her friends, some of her friends now, they kind of have this pact that they made where the expectation for getting together is that there is going to be no food consumed, and there will be no. Now, this doesn't mean that a person will be shunned and excommunicated if they suggest going to get, a coffee or something. But what it means is we need to get away from the expectation, which is, let's hang out. Okay, where do you want to go eat? Because for a lot of people, and especially for people that are trying to figure out, especially in this economy, how to live and how to live in a way that is moderate with their finances, that is one of the barriers to entry. It's subhanAllah, and you'll see that a lot of times when people do this, they focus way more on the experience of the food and of the drinks and everything than they do on the person that they're sitting across the table with. Some of the most meaningful relationships that I've had and that I continue to have till today are people that I go to Isha, and Isha is at like 9 o'clock, or I go to Maghrib, and Maghrib is at like 8:30 or something, or 7:30. And in my head, I'm like, I'm going to leave right away. But then we catch ourselves standing in the parking lot by one of our cars just talking for an hour. And then we, start getting the text messages, or we start, where are you, and this and that. And you realize, man, in order for our relationship to be this meaningful, we actually didn't need to spend any money, right? Apparently someone really agrees with me over there. So, but the point being is that as we seek to cultivate depth in a relationship, ask yourself what implicit financial bias you have and what financial gate is keeping you from having those cultivated relationships. I know some people, for example, that feel very left out because they can't afford to go on the trips with their friends. And those friends come back with the trips, and now all the jokes, all the references. Do you remember that one night? Do you remember in Tulum? And there's that one guy and that one girl who are like, I couldn't go.
Yeah.
And the people, it's almost like the lack of awareness is its own epidemic, right? And so as Sheikh is mentioning here, the importance of being vulnerable and being deep in your relationships, we also have to make sure that as a community, we don't create an environment where people are expected to spend to have friends. I think that is a huge gate that we don't realize, but it's impacting us deeply, right? Now, Imam Al-Ghazāli, to finish the passage, and then we'll go to some Q&A, he says, by excellence, we mean doing that which is beneficial to the person that one is dealing with. This is the part that I read. Without this being obligatory. I think a lot of times in relationships, whether it be friendships, whether it be co-working relationships, whether it be marriage, you get to a point where people start saying, they keep score. And they say, well, I would do this, but they never do this for me.
I remember sent you a meme, you didn't send me a meme back.
What did you say?
I said, I sent you a meme, you didn't.
Yeah, exactly, right? The biggest aib now in society is not responding to the meme.
Of course.
Right? Why did you, there's a meme, you didn't respond, they say, are you mad at me? No, man, I have 2 kids, you know what I mean? And you have 2 kids too, what are you doing sending memes? So anyways, but the point being is and I was actually I was at someone's house, and there was a list of people that were invited and whatever, and dinner finished, and then some people started to leave, and I think somebody else brought up a name of another family. I said, why didn't you invite them? You usually see them, whatever. They said, yeah, we invited them a couple times, and they never invited us back, so we cut them off. And I'm Egyptian, so we can't keep quiet in those moments. And so I remember saying, is this a restaurant or your home? And I said, if you want to have that type of relationship with your friends where you're only going to socialize with people that invite you back, then don't call that friendship, call that business, right? Is it the type of thing that you're only going to invite people? And this pervades everything. It pervades everything. And this is what Imam Ghazali is saying here. If you're going to live your life that way, you're going to go bankrupt socially very quickly. Sure, you have a business, but your business fails. And it actually, low-key, it sucks. And he says that your business is going to become bankrupt very quickly. So he says, don't operate based on the premise of that which is obligatory. He says that's already dealt with justice. And if you live your life in that way, you're never going to be happy. And he says it's already been mentioned. So, Sheikh, this is, I think, something that is very, very key and critical. And as we say every week, and I'd love for you to share some thoughts on this. This book, the reason why I think it's so beautiful for us to share together is because there's no pointing the finger at anybody else. Throughout every passage so far that we've read, it's as if the author is pointing the finger back at us and saying, you have to think deeply about yourself. When you look at people complaining to you about relationships, whether it be marriage or otherwise, how much of it do you think is solved by self-reflection?
I think a lot of it, but there's so much to add on this. Again, please allow me to step back.
Yeah, of course.
So when we speak about loneliness and people having connections but not really connecting deeply, there's a couple of things to look at. Number one is, what is our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like? And what I mean by that, are you committing sin that you feel you constantly have to hide and put up a mask that you can't let people really see you? That will be a hindrance between you connecting deeply with people because you're constantly afraid of them knowing the real you. Number two is that we have to also understand that the way we are brought up as children has a huge impact on who we become as teenagers. So if we're not, shown love and not, brought love to ourselves by our parents, it has a huge impact on our self-esteem and the way we view relationships. But at that point, you will have to logically convince yourself to emotionally heal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves me and the believers love me and I'm worthy of love, and put yourself out there. You can't let your self-esteem prevent you from putting yourself out there and developing deeper connections. The third point over here is, who are the people that people like? Like, what type of people are they? They are the people that don't speak bad about others. They are the people that are generous with their time and generous with their words. They're the ones that will go out of their way to help you, and they will also go out of their way to be there for you in your time of your need. When you have a happy moment, they'll be just as happy as you are for yourself. Right? They are a part of your team. Those are the people that you love. And when you do this, I genuinely believe that is how you will develop those deeper connections, right? So figure out your whole situation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, figure out your whole psychological situation thereafter, and then focus on the characteristics that you want to develop that actually a good friend would actually have. And I think that's how we're going to develop deeper connections. Like, it's so beautiful that you can come out here on a Tuesday night with like-minded people that want to develop deeper relationships. Now you got to put yourself out there and connect with people, right? And you take this 3-step process, bidhnillahi ta'ala, you can get there. Now, going back to the question, relationships always have like a pre, during, and post, right? Hindsight is always 20/20. I could have done something better. We get that. But I think there's so much importance over here that if you start off every relationship interacting with the person for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Let's go back to my meme example, because I feel I have trauma here. Like, I send people so many memes, but no one responds to me.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not you, bro. I love you, man. I
told you not to bring it up to me.
Like, why are you sending the meme, right? Genuinely, like, are you sending it for the sake of just discussing the meme next time we meet in person or talk? That's a valid intention. You're allowed to do that. Are you sending it for the sake of bringing a smile to someone's face? That's a higher intention. That's even better. Whoever brings, a smile to a believer's face has done a good deed. And I think as you focus on your intentionality behind why you're doing things, it makes life so much easier to handle. And the more focused you get on worldly reward and compensation, the more pain you will feel, right? So if you're doing it, I'm sharing a meme because I want them to send a meme back, you're setting yourself up for failure because you have no rights over the other person. But if you're doing it for the sake of, I want to bring a smile to this person's face, whether they send you a meme back or not, you've already fulfilled your goal, right? And you can feel good about yourself, and you will feel good about yourself. So make the transaction with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as opposed to the transaction with the human being. You transact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a profitable trade. You transact with the human being, it could go either way, right? It's a gamble. So I think if you focus on relationships from this perspective in advance, that's great. Now, during the relationship, I think apologizing first and thanking people are the two most important things. Like, in relationships, you need to learn to apologize even when you haven't done anything wrong, right? Just for the sake of validating people's emotions and experiences and letting them know that you care about the relationship, it's so important. And at the flip side of this is going out of your way to appreciate people, right? Everyone wants to be appreciated. Everyone wants to be recognized. If you can do that, that's the other half of the battle. And then in a post-relationship world, a relationship has ended. You're doing like a post-op in terms of, look, why did this relationship break down? What went wrong? What could I have done better? A lot of it will often come back to someone got too greedy in the relationship. Someone wanted to bite off more than they could chew, or someone violated a major violation in Islam, right? That's what it'll come down to often. And if you can prevent those things before the post-op happens, you'll save the relationship and you'll actually have a very fruitful relationship.
Yeah, there was a scholar, I think, that I read, subhanAllah, where he said that basically the end of every relationship can be traced back to a major sin being committed. Whether it was backbiting, whether it was lying, suspicion, whether it was, suspicion, any of these things. It always goes back to a major sin. Like, you don't see, this isn't talking about people not being as close anymore, but this is like a relationship breaking down, right? Like, there's a difference between like not driving that car anymore and like your car breaking. Yeah. So he was saying that, subhanAllah. May Allah protect us.
Ameen ya Rabbi.
So we have some questions. I know that Isha Adhan is in, we have about 15 more minutes, 16 more minutes before we should probably wrap up. Can we do some questions?
Inshallah. But can I leave in like 10 minutes? Would that be okay?
Of course, yeah. We can all leave in 10 minutes. Where are you going? Can we go with? No, I'm joking. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. All right, Bismillah. We'll wrap up in 10 minutes then. So we'll do a little bit of a lightning round. The first question is about marriage. I'm so surprised. What does it mean if a man asks for katb kitab or nikah, but says he's not ready for the wedding? Is this common, and how should I interpret the intentions if it leads to arguments? I'm so happy you're here.
Allahu Akbar.
I'm just so happy you're here right now.
I love you too.
Because this is usually, no, wallahi, I love you, but I'm also just happy you're here because this is usually my burden, and now I just get to read. This is just like me reading. I feel like Mr. Rogers.
Got you.
What do you do if a person says they're ready for nikah, but they're not ready for the walima?
Have a conversation. Like, why is that complicated? Hey.
I'm so happy you're here.
As in, let's sit and talk. Like if you're about to get married and you're nervous, that's cool, that's fine. But what are you nervous about? Like, let's talk about that.
Or maybe there's a financial component here. I'm kind of reading into this and thinking, is there a cost to the wedding? The nikah is usually very simple, right? And maybe there's a cost to the wedding that is being imposed upon this person, perhaps, right? The expectation is there.
I also think it could be like commitment issues. It could be intimacy issues.
Could be, for sure.
A variety of things. And again, like what you and I are doing, we're just assuming.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And if you're on the opposite end of this, you're just making assumptions with no verification.
And honestly, it's not my marriage, so like you figure it out. But no, but you know what they say in medicine? Like the most like usually the most correct diagnosis is the most obvious one, right? So people usually go to WebMD and they're like, "You don't believe what I have," and it's like, no, you just have a cough. I feel like when I read this, and you're right, it could be a slew of things. I would start with the conversation about, you know, what do you think is the reason why you're ready for nikah, but not ready for a walima?
Yeah,
and then move from there.
I think I love to make things practical as much as possible.
Yeah.
So go up to the individual and tell them, look, you know, I really care about you and I really want this to work out. And this is a safe space. Tell me what's going on. And let's just sit and talk, right? And you have to come across as non-judgmental. You have to come across as very easygoing. And make dua for them. Look, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unite us upon goodness and make things easy for all of us. You know, let's make this happen. What do we need to do? Right? We're a team working on a problem together. It's not your problem. It's not my problem. It's our problem. We're working on it together. And I think people are more likely to open up when it's like a team effort as opposed to, oh, it's your problem. You got to solve it. I'll see you at the wedding. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. See, I would say that this is a good trial run into figuring out how you're going to deal with inevitable disagreements that are going to happen in your marriage. Yeah. So may Allah make it easy, inshallah.
I mean,
the idea of getting to know someone for marriage makes me nervous. Not me. I'm fine. Is there a dua I can say to overcome this? Is that normal to be nervous at this grown age? Melting emoji face.
Getting into any relationship can be nerve-wracking.
Yeah, absolutely.
But over here, it's about figuring out, again, your why. Why are you getting to know this person? It's not for the sake of doing anything haram. It's for the sake of fulfilling half of your faith. And sometimes you have to overcome the things that you're afraid of in order to achieve those greater things, right? Let's quote Optimus Prime here. Fate rarely comes upon a people at a time of their choosing, right? If you want to get the person that you desire so badly, you got to get to know them. That's just the way that it works. So with that being said, I think, again, a 3-step process is try to understand why you're afraid. Like, where is this coming from? And see if there's a way to troubleshoot that. Number 2 is ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for strength, right? Musa alayhi salam, when he used to make his famous dua, Rabbi shrah li sadri, wa yassir li amri, and make things easy for me, right? Expand for me my chest and make things easy for me. So allow me to be able to carry this burden, but also make it easy for me. It's not just about carrying the burden, but asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for ease as well. And then number 3, what I would say is ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to beautify everything that you see. Who doesn't want to be in a beautiful world? Who doesn't want to be exposed to beautiful people? Who doesn't want to be in beautiful experiences? You ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that sort of worldview and that sort of lens, and it becomes a lot more enjoyable to be there.
Jazakallah khairan. Okay. What should I do if people are bad-mouthing me? I don't want to defend myself or speak ill of them, yet they keep getting in my business and ruining my relationships.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. So I think there's 2 things to look at over here. Number 1, did you do something wrong? Number 2, did you not do something wrong? Let's start off with the latter. If you didn't do anything wrong, the general tradition is leave it up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He will defend you and He will take care of you. This is just noise that you need to ignore and move on with your life. Those people that leave you weren't meant to be in your life anyways, right? Now, if you did do something wrong, this is the big one. You got to fess up to it and say, look, I'm really sorry. I messed up. I hurt you. I did X, Y, and Z. You start off with the apology. Number 2, how do I repair the relationship? How can you and I become friends again? What can I do to make it up to you? And give them space to figure that out. Like, that's such an important question. You can't be like, okay, you have 60 seconds to tell me how we fix this relationship because I got to run. You have to give them time to figure out what repairs look like, right? And how you can fix that. And then number 3, eventually realize that not all relationships are going to go back to the way that they were before. And you have to be okay with that. Just like not all people will get along instantaneously, not all people will get along forever. Right? We have a beautiful example in the Prophet ﷺ with Wahshi. Right? Wahshi accepted Islam, and yet the Prophet ﷺ still felt pain in his heart towards what he did to his cousin. Right? And that's okay. That's a part of being human, but it shows us that not everyone needs to be best friends. But again, we can't be unjust towards people. So that's how I would answer that, and Allah knows best.
How do you make friends in your 30s?
So I think we sort of answered that, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, like, make sure you have nothing to hide. Live an open life to the best of your ability. Do a self-assessment in terms of, do you have self-esteem issues? How do we work on that self-esteem and that confidence? And then develop those characteristics that are likable towards people. And hang around in beautiful places like this.
I was going to say, I think community is important. I also think the challenge when you're 30 is like you tend to be like a fixed personality type. And then you meet people and then they want to like make plans to do something and you don't see that as being something that you do. So for example, somebody's like, oh, let's go, play volleyball. And you're like, oh, I've never played volleyball in my life. And so you're like, no, I'm good. And you miss out on that opportunity, but really it wasn't about the sport. It was about the chance to interact and spend time, right? And you may not even have to go and do the actual activity. Just being there, being present, laughing, enjoying the company, etc. That's fine. I think a lot of times we set ourselves up for expectations of what friendship looks like, when in fact it can be a lot less demanding and stressful than we realize, right? It's really more about presence than anything else. Are you thinking about me playing volleyball?
No, bro. I'm just like, I just wanted someone to play video games with.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted.
So it's one of those things where I think like we put these expectations that are almost too ideal.
Yeah.
When it's in reality, presence is the most important aspect of any relationship, including 100%. Making friends. Are you going to be a present person?
Allahu Akbar.
Those are the things that are there. And obviously making sure that there's things between you that you share, that you agree on, things like that, inshallah. We'll do one or two more and then we'll, the plant between you two is dying. Please water it. We actually did water it. I think right here, it got a lot of sun in the past couple of days. So that's why it looks like it's dying, but thank you. For that incredible advice and the way you phrased it, mashallah. There's a couple about like marrying somebody and then their mother being a problem. Should you still marry a man if you feel that their mother doesn't approve? Is it normal for a man's mother to ask other families who have previously pursued you for marriage about you? It's spicy. Okay, so I guess the first one is, should you marry a person if you feel their mom doesn't approve? I think this is one of those questions where a general answer is usually not the right way to go. There's case by case, but Sheikh, I'll defer to you.
I appreciate that.
I think everyone's waiting and really interested.
So again, I think it's not fair to give a very simplistic answer and say, it's all about compatibility between you and the spouse. Marriage is more, than just that. So I would say, let's find out why she doesn't like you. Right? Let's start with that. Is there something that really needs to be fixed? If there is, let's fix it. If there isn't, then let's move on to, okay, it's between the man and myself. If we get along really, really well and he thinks that he's going to be able to navigate this relationship together with my help, then bismillah, let's go forward with it. But if it's like, this is going to be too catastrophic for him and he's not going to be able to handle it, then even though I may want something and we may want something, it's not going to be a good fit. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replace it with something better for both of us.
There we go. That's good. Alhamdulillah. And then the last thing I want to talk about tonight is, I'm not sure if you heard, but our brother Marcellus was unjustly murdered today by the criminal injustice system. I don't know if you saw, but Sheikh Omar shared and many others that his last statement was that I praise Allah in all situations. And that's the last thing that he wrote as his last statement before being executed by the state of Missouri. So we ask that Allah Ta'ala accept him as a shaheed.
Ameen.
We ask that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala accept him and that the moment that his life, his soul was taken from his body, that he was shown the gardens of paradise.
Ameen.
And that the angel of death came to him in a beautiful way and
Ameen.
Released him gently where he felt no pain. We ask that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala took him by means of the angels up to the highest level of the heavens to see his place and his abode in Jannah.
Ameen.
And we ask that in his resting place in the Barzakh, we ask that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala give him nothing but pleasure and relief and comfort for all of the injustice that he was subjected to in this life. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not hold us to account for the inability and the weaknesses that we have in serving our brothers and sisters who are in systems of oppression, and then not being able to free them, Ya Rab. So if you have any thoughts or any du'as you want to make, then we can inshallah conclude after that.
No, subhanAllah, like I think it was really, really important that we spoke about that today as we were talking about justice.
Yes.
So I think it's really important. And I think this is a good point to conclude on. In this particular case, both the prosecutor and the defense said there's holes and gaps in the evidence. Can we please stop this execution? Yet the judge still went ahead with it. You have both the prosecutor and the defense telling there's a problem here, don't go forward with it. But the judges just fixed in their ways. So what you take away from this is a constant reminder to ourselves that this world was never meant to be a permanent abode of happiness. It was never meant to be the ultimate source of justice. It was never meant to be this perfect place. It's okay to, forget about that sometimes, because it's human that we forget. But you should never believe that you will find justice truly in this life. You should never believe that you will truly be happy in this life. All those things are for Jannah, and all those things are for the hereafter. And that is what our faith brings to us. We're talking about relevancy of faith. Imagine you had to live in this sort of world with no faith. Like, what happens with this person when you have no faith? Faith brings you solace. Religion brings you comfort. It makes you find purpose and meaning in all the hardship that you face. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make things easy for his family and for the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Ameen, Ya Rab. And we have full faith in believing that Allah ta'ala does not wrong anybody.
Of course.
And that we believe that even though humans wrong one another, Allah replaces the wrongs and He compensates for the wrongs and injustices that we experience. So, one of my teachers, he said, because we would ask him about things like Palestine, and we would ask him and say, how can we as Muslims understand this? Allah is the all-powerful. He's the all-knowing. Like, why? Why do these things happen? And he said, you need to believe that Allah is giving them something that makes whatever this life could have been in its best form look like nothing. And that's why when Allah describes Jannah, He describes the believers in paradise, and He says that they say that this life was nothing. And the hadith say that they can't even remember the joys they had in this life. They can't even remember it, because by comparison, it completely and totally disappeared. It was eviscerated, right? You think of the best joys you have now compared to the joys you had when you were a child, and those joys now, they completely erase some of those memories because there's so much more in their quality and quantity and substance. And so we have full faith that the moment that our brother, that his soul was taken from his body tonight, that he was in a state of complete and total bliss and comfort and ease. We ask Allah Ta'ala to, again, reward his family for their patience and to reward him for his sacrifice and his patience as he sat there and had his life taken for an unjust reason, Ya Rab. Barakallahu feekum, everybody. We appreciate you coming through, Sheikh. Of course, with your busy schedule and everything that you have, you've been so far away from your family for so long. So we really, really appreciate it. We hope that this was a home away from home.
It was.
And Jazakumullah khairan. We can't wait to have you back. Barakallahu feekum. We're going to, inshallah, allow Sheikh Navaid to head out because he does have some things he has to do. He's got to go give salam to some people here. So we'll go ahead and say salam to him as a group, everybody, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. And like I said, the Isha prayer is just going to be in 10 minutes. So we'll go ahead and wrap up with that. So if you can help me by putting the back jacks up to the front, and then for those of you who sat in the black folding chairs, to help us by folding them and putting them on the dollies. Jazakallah khairan wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Oh, it is? Oh, I'm so sorry. Isha time is happening right now. So if you can forget the chairs and go. Forget the chairs and go. It changed today. I'm so sorry. It's at 8:45. I think they waited for a few minutes for us, so you can just forget all the chairs. We will take care of them. And you can head over. Assalamu alaikum.
I know Aisha's right now. I'm wondering, I just wanted to speak to you for a few minutes, but if after Aisha's a better time, is that
Can you message me on Telegram and we can set up a time, inshallah? Is that okay?
okay? It's about the event that's